hi, my name is Finn,
And I'm Miguel.
and today we are talking about.
Mexican politics and movies.
Alright, well, that is quite a combination.
You know.
Um, but I think partially because we actually met in a Mexican politics class
Yes.
2 quarters ago.
Correct. Yeah.
Way
With
back in
Professor Alamillo.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say thank you for having me here today, Finn, again.
Oh, well,
It's
thank
an
you.
honor.
Thank you for being here, Miguel. That was a good class. I really enjoyed that class. Actually, the first guest on this show, Delaney, was also in that class. So, sort of almost a full circle moment there. But you grew up in Mexico.
Yes.
Where you grew up near Mexico City, right?
Yeah. I was born in a little town. It's Cuernavaca. It's just in Morelos State, which, if you were to put a distance between it, it would be Bellingham, Seattle, about that same distance between Cuernavaca and Mexico City. So it's basically just a city where people from Mexico City go and have chill time. They just relax.
Right.
It's a tourist city. If you,
Yeah, less busy.
I've heard that now it has more people because it's grown in size since. Of course, I've been there, but it's a lovely city. I love that city so much.
And you moved to the United States relatively recently. Like, you still have your Mexican citizenship. And
Yes. Well, I actually started coming to the United States for high school. I came here and I was living in Spokane, Washington at the time. I did 3 years at mid high school, and then for my senior year, I moved to Bellingham. I went to Bellingham High for my senior year, and then I graduated high school. Went to Mexico to do some college, and then came back here in 2021 to start college again.
was it like your parents' work, or what brought you to Washington State?
No, it's my aunt and uncle. My uncle, he was born in Spokane Valley, and so he met my aunt 40 years ago. They got married. They've been living here ever since, and they just felt like inviting me to come over, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll do that. But my parents and my sister, they were still in Mexico.
Yeah. Did you? So obviously you grew up in Mexico. From conversations that we've had, you're certainly a politically engaged person. Did you learn anything from Rudy's class, or was it mostly? I mean, I'm sure it was mostly a review from stuff you already knew, but was it 100% review, or was there something that you gained?
It's funny that you ask that. When I was looking through the syllabus of the class, I sent it to my sister, and she said, bro, you could teach that class. And I was like, yeah, probably. But I'm just going to take it because it's something that I feel that I know a little bit of, and probably I could put my little grain of salt into the class. And it was a fun class. I didn't really learn much because I lived through most of the stuff that it was told, especially the last part of it. I was there, so I had first-hand experience on the topics. But still, a fun class nonetheless. Awesome professor. But what about you? Did you learn anything in the class?
Yeah, I had like kind of a basic knowledge of Mexican politics. Beforehand, I knew who AMLO was. I knew who EPN was, and I knew about the PRI and how, like, the very, very basics of how they managed or controlled Mexico during their period in power. But I definitely learned more about the Mexican Revolution, which I didn't know as much about. I definitely learned more about Mexico's political economy and kind of the details of the different presidents. Kind of like I knew who AMLO was. I knew who Enrique Peña Nieto was, and I knew who Vicente Fox was. I didn't really know anyone else. And so learning about the different figures, of course, most of those guys were guys, so they're in a line of the same ideological strand, but each one with kind of their own personality and policies and stuff. And so learning about that more in detail was definitely, I would say I learned quite a bit, probably more than I usually learn from poli-sci classes. And I think part of that is also, this is the first class I really took detailed notes from like the slides, which they were very accessible, easy to take notes from, but
Yeah. And I like to think that we took that class at a interesting time in Mexico because it was election year, and we finished the class in March, just a couple months before the actual elections. But then we kept talking about it during our work schedule that we had together.
right, because we are also coworkers. Forgot to
Yeah.
mention that.
So what do you? I think what's to some degree we were disagreeing on our views on the new president, but
Yeah, I mean, I was joking around a bit, but so Claudia Sheinbaum would be the new president of Mexico in
Yes.
the fall or the November.
yeah, October 1st, it's when she gets into
Okay.
the office. Yeah.
Cool. So she is from the same party as the current president, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, or AMLO, as he's often called, and she is kind of notable about her. She's the first woman president of Mexico, first Jewish president, but also she is just very much in the same ideological kind of left-wing populist brand as AMLO, and on an international level, I generally consider myself pretty left-wing, but her victory was overwhelming. By the way, it wasn't
say,
really
yeah.
even close, and it isn't. Like I said, we were joking around a lot, as I knew you were a huge fan of her, and so I was like, I love her. But in all honesty, there have been some worrying developments for Mexican democracy under AMLO that she seems poised to continue being very kind of AMLO historically very dismissive or antagonistic towards the media, and then has pushed a pretty controversial plan to reform the Supreme Court by allowing for basically the direct election of judges. But that's really the extent of my knowledge. I'd love to hear more about what your take on her win is and what that means for AMLO's legacy moving forward.
Oh, right off the bat, I can tell you that I did not enjoy, especially that night when the results came in, the just wide margin that she had of a win that day. When I was voting on those elections, I knew that the candidate that I chose wasn't going to win, but I still voted because I wanted to say I did it. I wasn't contributing to the demise of my country.
Right.
But then I started thinking, historically, Mexico has usually been under control by a single party. From its ruling during Spain for 300 years, and then when they tried to come up with a new government, they couldn't, so they brought back Agustin de Iturbide, and so he's had a monarchy, and then they got rid of that, and then they tried to do a republic. Didn't work because we had the Second Empire, and then after that we had a dictatorship that lasted 34 years. Revolution came.
So Porfirio Diaz.
That was
Yeah.
Porfirio Diaz, yeah. And then the revolution didn't really work other than to create a constitution, but now it was a way to make a dictatorship within the legal framework that was at the time.
Right.
Because that's what happened. It was like, okay, we cannot have a dictatorship on one person, then let's make it a party dictatorship. And
Yeah.
that happened for 70 years. A single party rule. It was a different head, but it was the same.
It became the state.
It became the state.
Yeah.
And so for this election, it was the first time since 2000 when the new party came and like a new democracy was born, according to what experts said back then, that we see a party getting control over the lower chamber and just a couple seats shy of getting majority for the Supreme Court. And those results hadn't made an appearance since probably the 1970s with the pre.
That level of
That level
overwhelming.
of overwhelming. And the 1970s, because that's when two new parties emerged to sort of like remove votes from the pre. At that point, I could tell you that people were probably tired of the situation. The Mexican peso had just been devaluated, so it lost a couple zeros. The dollar was going up, and then the peso was going down. So people started to panic. I remember reading about that back then it was illegal for Mexicans to have dollars, or they just couldn't access to them. So they had to go on the black market to get dollars if they wanted to trade with them.
Like U.S. dollars.
U.S. dollars, yeah. They were not a thing in Mexico for a little bit of time. And so, putting into perspective, the night of July 2nd, when the election happened, it was telling us something
Or
about
June 2nd.
June 2nd, my apologies. It was telling us something that the people demanded for the 6 years that were just ending to continue for another 6. And I was just trying to wrap my mind around it. Like, how did this happen? How did we come this, I guess, separated from reality? And I started thinking back. When AMLO first started, he was really pushing for people to be identified as two types of people in society. He had the poor and he had the rich. And he made that clear distinction that the rich didn't like the poor. So he was just infuriating the poor. And there was no middle class with AMLO, because the middle class, he just made them poor. So he specifically attacked the rich
Did you
and
mean
media.
he labeled them as poor?
Yes.
Okay.
He labeled them as poor and rich, and he made sure that society knew that he was anti-rich and anti-media, and with people, the poor, because he was talking to them.
This is this populist.
The populist, yeah.
Yeah.
That idea that how do I get them to like me? Well, I take away what they have, and then I just slowly give them a little bit so that they see me as their savior, in a way. So, I hope for Mexico's good that this coming 6 years, they just, it's gonna be historical, no matter where you see it. First, we have the first female president, as you say, and in a country such as Mexico, that's massive, massive news. And I just hope that the way that this woman goes into history is for some of her own accomplishments, and not to live under the shadow of Lopez Obrador
Right.
during her 6
That
years.
she hasn't, a lot of, and this is the opinion that I took going into that election, is that, well, broadly, my opinion was that, as an observer, okay, Morena, AMLO's party, itself isn't necessarily this threat to Mexico's democracy. And maybe you'll disagree with me, and I'd love to hear your reasons why. But that was my thought. But AMLO has a very combative personality specific to him. He ran in 2006 under a different party and lost, but then said the election was stolen and claimed to be president for like a month. And he wore a presidential sash, which is totally illegitimate and outside the bounds of what should be permissible in democratic elections. And so, like you were saying, okay, well, maybe with President Sheinbaum, she will carry on policies that might be beneficial for poor people in Mexico or the country at large, but won't have this personality of combativeness and kind of a almost anti-democratic bent that AMLO had, but I'd love to hear what you
Yeah,
have to say about him.
AMLO also ran in 2012 and
Right.
lost. So when he won in 2018, that was his third time running, and well, this time he actually got it.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember 2018 election. I didn't vote on that because I was in the States. But I do remember the way that those elections took place, because AMLO also won with a super margin of difference among the other two candidates.
In
One of them
20
was pre
in 2018.
2018.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't as big as Shane Bounce, but he had
It
a.
was pretty big.
It was
It
pretty
was
big. Yeah,
historic.
it was his historic election for sure. And what that told the Mexican population was that the old parties weren't doing it right for the Mexican population, or they just were tired of political parties.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you take Morena, it's usually most of the people that at some point started from those parties. AMLO started in pre, but
And
his
then he was with
ideals,
the PRD, and then
yeah,
now he's yeah.
his ideals were just too different from what the pre had, and then he also got kicked out of PRD, so he founded his new party. But it was interesting to see how people were completely ignoring the political parties that had failed them for 70 years, and then with PAN, who had 12 years to prove that some change was possible. Sadly, that didn't happen for X or Y reasons. So it was a wake up call, 2018. And it's saddening because in those 6 years, opposition didn't try to gain more followers. They were more focused on trying to get AMLO out of power.
Right.
So they marginalized the people, their supporters. It never felt that opposition was doing a good job
Right.
at trying to gain followers.
Because the coalition that was backing the main rival to Scheinbaum was, if I'm not mistaken, the PRD, and PAN,
Yes.
who all used to fight with each other
Yeah.
and have very different
Oh.
political ideologies. PAN is a conservative
Yeah.
party, had religious interests. PRD used to be the party of the radical left, and
yeah.
it's still a social democratic party.
It is.
And then PRI is whatever, a blob trying to fit into whatever will get them votes.
Yeah.
But so there
AMLO,
isn't like a clear ideological message that they're pushing other
they have
than
nothing.
yeah.
I don't even know how their candidate, Xochitl Galvez, came to be. But she wasn't popular.
No.
Every person that I would ask from Mexico, they just didn't like her. But
And
they
that
also
was reflected in the vote.
and that was reflected in the vote.
Yeah.
But at the same time, people who didn't like Morena didn't know who to vote for because the options weren't that good either.
Yeah.
It was like choosing the worst of the lesser of the evils there.
Right.
So, I don't know. I would say 10% of a winning margin, it's probably just a bad day. Having 20% of a win margin is just like, okay, people are trying to send a message. Winning by 30%, that's a mandate from the people.
Yeah. And not only that, but winning every state but one, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. But to me, that tells me that people are really tired of hearing political parties. And one of them, PRD, actually lost its registry. They can no longer be a party because they
What?
didn't get the 3% that requires. Mexico requires for every political party to get 3% of elections, and if they don't get that 3%, they're gone. They're done for.
So did they not have any seats in
No, they just
Chamber of
couldn't
Deputies?
get no. That's gonna be gone.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And they used to be, one of the two big opposition parties.
Yeah, that's how they came to be. It was opposition. Those who didn't fit with PAN and those who didn't fit with PRI, AMLO decided to create
PRD.
this. Yeah, security.
Wow.
And now it's gone.
I wasn't aware of that, but that's a pretty stark. It shows that there's a pretty big political realignment going on in Mexico.
Yes. And I talked to two different sectors of the population in Mexico. I talked to the elite, the rich, and I also talked to some not so fortunate people.
Mm-hmm.
And the views that they were saying were interesting, and I guess it makes sense. Those who have money in Mexico, they usually just care about themselves and how to make it bigger, larger, just to how to get more money. And that's been historically true in Mexico. When PRI was in power, the allocation of resources wasn't pretty fair. There were a lot of poor people in Mexico, but they had this sense that they were happier for some reason. And now you take a look at the poor areas in Mexico, and they don't look that happy. So back to where I was. The rich people were saying, yeah, this is unfair. Now this party has majority, so they're going to write whatever they want in the Constitution. And then I was looking at the poor people. And I can tell you that their concern is not what the Supreme Court is going to look like. They are worried about who's going to give them those 20 pesos to put some bread on that table.
Mm-hmm.
So AMLO, one of the things he did, I'm not going to label it as good or bad, but one of the many things he did was to create this sort of monthly income scholarships for students, single mothers, or what have you, and cut the middleman.
Mm-hmm.
He was
So
gonna
a direct payment.
a direct
system.
payment
Okay.
to the citizens.
Right.
But in order to qualify into these programs, you had to follow certain criteria,
Right.
which at the time it was most of Mexico.
Yeah.
So when the president started saying, if you vote for these other parties, they're going to take away this income that you're receiving monthly, that scares people.
Right.
Because if I were in their situation, I surely wouldn't care who's writing the Constitution, who's ruling the Supreme Court. If
Yeah, you have immediate material needs that you have to
exactly
meet.
that I have to
Yeah.
meet, are those being provided for? They are, to a degree, to an extent. Am I richer? No, but I can live through this whole month.
Yeah.
And that was the
So
contrast
why
that I
take
would
the
see.
risk? Yeah.
Exactly.
Sure.
So I'm just gonna go with whatever it's working for me at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And if at some point it's not working, then I'm just gonna deal with it when time comes. And that's the reality that I saw in Mexico as to why this election developed this way.
Sure. Just in the interest of time, briefly switch gears to movies.
Okay.
You worked at the Pickford
Yes.
in town, and you also had in Mexico. You had a radio show about reviewing movies.
Yes, I
Which is
was
pretty
in
cool.
I had a section every Thursday, MVS, and I used to talk about the movies that came out during that week so that people would go over the weekend and just watch that
them,
movie.
yeah.
And yeah, one of the first things I did when I came back to Bellingham was to try to work at Regal. They never called me back. So then I found out about Pickford, and I was like, oh, they take volunteers. So
Yeah.
I started volunteering there, and then they noticed how good I was with movies or how much I knew about movies.
Mhm.
So then eventually they started letting me take inventory of the posters or just doing other activities that no regular volunteer would do.
Mhm.
And I love movies so much.
Do you? I know your favorite movie is Schindler's List,
Yes.
I believe. But what are some good movies that you've seen this year? I know we both seen Dune, too, which was great. What else has caught your eye?
This year, if I'm being honest, I haven't watched many movies this year.
Mhm.
And most of the good movies usually come around December
Sure.
for a year. But
Well, I guess maybe including last year too.
including last year.
Yeah.
Oh, Finnegan. I've been watching more TV shows lately than
Okay.
series. Because I got into the TV show game really late in life. I used to hate shows, but then I started getting into this. I was like, okay, maybe I'll give them a go. So I've been watching The Bear season 3, or Baby Reindeer is also a good one. Presumed Innocence on Apple TV. You should check that out with Jake Gyllenhaal.
Oh, I like him.
Yeah, and I don't. I love court dramas, and this one is just
It's the one with Jake Gyllenhaal's a court drama.
yes, yeah.
What's the premise?
He's a lawyer, and he is put in charge to find who killed his assistant or the. Yep. But at the same time, we have another lawyer also having a similar investigation, and it kind of points to that it could be Jake or it could be somebody else, but you need to be certain. What I love about this series is that I'm not, and these are not spoilers. This is just right off the
Right, sure.
description. It invites the audience to be the jury for that trial that you're about to see.
Whoa.
So the way that they're presenting it to you,
interactive.
yeah, because Jake explains it in the first 3 minutes of the show. If you find this person to be guilty by a reasonable, beyond reasonable doubt, then you should convict him. But if you find him not to be guilty, or if you have doubts that he's guilty, then you should let him free. So by inviting the audience to participate in this show, the way that dynamic works there, it shifts your perception.
So you really pay attention to every little detail. Like
So
that.
but you don't know this until you start making sense of the first episode. That
Sure.
oh, okay, I have to be a participating member for this to be enjoyable.
Yeah.
And every episode they just every episode is presented to you as evidence, so that at the end
Interesting.
you make your decision.
And don't spoil it, obviously, but I assume they filmed two different endings. One where the guy's guilty and one where they're innocent.
Well, there's no ending yet, so
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure.
Well, I
They're
assume
releasing it weekly.
It sounds like that would be what it is, which is cool. That sounds like a really interesting
Yeah.
concept.
I know. Apple TV is really pushing for really good shows that they have. One of the earlier shows that they had was Defending Jacob, with this Chris Evans and the kid from It.
Right. It's the kid who he gets blamed for a crime
For
or
a crime,
something,
yeah.
and
For murdering a classmate.
he's the dad, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
The
haven't
dad
seen
is
it,
a lawyer. Yeah. No,
but I've
it's
seen the
another.
trailers and that looked good.
It's another good show.
Yeah.
The build up for the tension is there, and that's what for me that's
Right.
what I look for.
I had Apple TV for a little bit because I was watching this show, Prehistoric Planet, which is like a Walking with Dinosaurs
Yes.
style thing.
Yes.
I'm a big dinosaur. Always was a big dinosaur guy. And it's really well done. David Attenborough narrates it. And then also, which I have not seen this, but a show based on the Foundation books by Isaac Asimov.
Yes.
I know there's a show. It might be in its second season now. I also need to watch. So I've heard that there's some good stuff coming out of Apple TV, and what I'm really waiting for is the extended edition of Ridley Scott's Napoleon movie.
Yes.
Because I saw that in theaters, and I thought it was okay.
It's sort of disappointing.
It
Yeah.
was disappointing, but apparently it was like 2.5 hours or 2 hours 45, and apparently there's like a 3.5 hour or like 4 hour version, and I was like, okay, I love really long historical epics. I love like Barry Lyndon.
Yeah.
Is one of my favorite movies, and so or Amadeus. I rewatched that last week, which is a great movie. And so I'll probably watch that when that extended version is out.
Yes.
But yeah, the original theatrical cut was not amazing.
No, I mean, Napoleon is such a complex character,
Right.
that there was just no way he would be able to fit into 245.
Yeah, they covered about 25 years of history in 2 hours, or 2.5 hours, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right off the bat, I knew that the titanic task that he had to perform there, it was just not gonna
Yeah.
live up to expectations.
Though I think Joaquin Phoenix is a pretty good cast
Oh.
as Napoleon. He does a good job.
There's no complaint of the casting.
And Vanessa Kirby.
Yeah, the acting, it's
Yeah.
just pristine.
But the script.
But the script, yeah.
Yeah.
If the script isn't good, then the movie is just, it doesn't matter who you have there as acting material. It's just gonna be a flop.
Well, it's like the Star Wars prequels, which sue me. I don't like. They're fun to watch, but I don't think they're very good movies. But you have like great actors. You got Natalie Portman, one of the best actresses of our
Yes.
generation. Ewan McGregor, great. I mean, Christopher Lee. I mean, he does a pretty good job, but still, like, amazing. Samuel L. Jackson, and Hayden Christensen hasn't really been in a lot besides those movies, but he's a good actor too. And their performances in the movie, those movies, mainly Natalie Portman, Hayden Christensen, and Samuel L. Jackson, are not very good because of the script.
They're toned down a little.
Mm-hmm.
Their artistic margin is just Natalie Portman. Let's just start with that.
Yeah.
Academy Award winner for The Black Swan.
Yeah, incredible.
Incredible.
Incredible actress.
And then you have her also performing this. Like, oh, Natalie, what happened to you?
No.
But yeah, some actors just don't have it in them.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you make the best of what you got, I guess. But anyway, we got to wrap up here. But what are you looking forward to?
In the future, well, today I'm wearing my 1971 Coke shirt.
Uh-huh.
And this campaign in particular, it was Hilltop. So the message for that ad was, I want to buy the Coke, the whole world of Coke, and enjoy it with them.
Mm-hmm.
So as a Coke lover, I would like to see everybody enjoying a Coke and smiling. I'm all about helping people. I love helping people. I guess that's why Schindler's List is my favorite movie, because at the end, he's trying to save one more person.
Right.
And to me, that's just fantabulous.
One way, I think I know what scene you're talking about.
It's the end.
It's the very end.
When
He's
they
like,
are giving him the ring and they tell him, we have this paper, every single one of us sign it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for what you did. And even then,
he's like, I could have done a little
I
bit more.
could have done more.
Yeah.
20 more with selling this car. This pin, 5 people.
Yeah.
That's the desire that gets me up in the morning. Like, how many people can I help today?
Yeah.
And that's just beautiful. So
Yeah.
this is my favorite campaigns from Coca-Cola. And it's just, I would love to do that for the world.
Looking forward to doing your part.
A
as
united
much as
world,
you can.
yes.
Yeah.
I keep dreaming that eventually I'll become Mexico's president, 2036 possibly.
Sure. Conservative estimate. Yeah.
Well, that's you need to be 35 to run for president, so I'll be
okay.
36 when time comes.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, it's an ambition. Hopefully, maybe. But I would love to help people in Mexico.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, thank you all for watching, and
Thanks
again for coming on, Miguel.
Thank you for having me, Finn, again.
Cool. All right. Bye, everyone.